Hello, and welcome to the Mental Barbell. The Mental Barbell is by athletes and for athletes. We offer individual coaching and team workshops. If you're interested or have any questions at all, please drop us a line at info@thementalbarbell.com. That email again is info@thementalbarbell.com. So today we're going to kind of talk about this past week in sports and use that as a segue into intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. Hey, Chris.
What's happening, Ian? How you doing, brother?
I'm good, and you?
Good, man.
So what's going on this week in sports? What can you tell us?
Yeah, so we had a fun, what was it, Saturday midday, which was weird because they were fighting over in Abu Dhabi, but we had Khabib hold on to his title and at the same time retire, which was pretty cool and interesting to see. And in today's topic of motivation and intrinsic and extrinsic, the reasoning behind his retirement was because his father passed away. And for those of you who don't follow the UFC that much, his father was just a well-renowned coach. Everyone in the world knew him, respected him. The whole UFC world tweeted their regards to him when he passed away. And for Habib, they've been training forever. They've been training since he was a young child together. So obviously that's a huge loss. He didn't even know if he was going to take the fight without his father in his corner to help train him. So it was just a huge loss for him. And he took it, won the belt, and he's retiring for that. So that's kind of a good segue into our weekly topic of intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. So obviously a big intrinsic motivation guy. Ian, can you kind of speak to like intrinsic motivation, what that kind of stems from and how that can help an athlete kind of perform?
Yeah, absolutely. So it all kind of stems from where you find your rewards. And so someone who's very extrinsically motivated finds their rewards in money or success or something along those lines that they have to kind of get from other people. So kind of to what you're speaking of, an intrinsically motivated athlete or an intrinsically motivated anyone, they derive that reward from something inside of them. So they just do it for the love of the sport, or I've seen a lot of people just kind of talking about just joy and passion for what they're doing, and so they're not actively participating in their sport for the money or the endorsements, but they're doing it for the true love of the sport. And it's very easy to kind of confound those two and think, oh, intrinsic motivation is good and extrinsic is always bad. But there are certain times in which one can be used rather than the other, and that's more a point to a leadership style, and we can kind of talk on that later. But it definitely sounds like what you're talking about. Khabib was able to retire because of that intrinsic motivation, and he wasn't still chasing money or fame or anything like that. And so a lot of times that extrinsic motivation, that external reward, can push an athlete to compete well past their prime. If you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, for sure. Part of what Khabib said was that him and his dad completed a chapter in essence when he won all the titles, and that was their goal. So he's able to ride away, like you said, at his peak, into the sunset, not really worry about if he wants to come back or not. And it's interesting. So when you talk Khabib, you also obviously right away think of Conor McGregor, who in essence is, from what we've seen in the base of his career, he's always believed he was going to be the best. And he's been capitalizing that with these extrinsic gains. And one could say that the personality he is to draw on the big money fights, the fight with Floyd Mayweather, stuff like that.
Mhm.
And they both obviously are top of their game. Both have made their money. Both have won championships. So back to what you were saying, with both can drive people that far. What can you say kind of for Conor, and in terms of how he's capitalized on his love for the sport and his ability and capitalize on those extrinsic values he has?
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of what happens for athletes, and I know our viewers can kind of attest to this, but it happens behind the scenes. And so while we've heard about, Conor McGregor in the last probably 5 years, what we haven't seen is the 20 years prior to that he's training in, a basement, not making enough money to put food on his table, and his wife's supporting him, or his girlfriend at the time supporting him. And so I think a lot of times you can assume that someone like that has that flashy personality, and they're going after the endorsement deals and the media deals,
Mhm.
and we think that that's their only motivation. They're just in it for the money. But what we don't see a lot of times is all the behind the scenes. You don't just become a world champion overnight and then get all these endorsement deals. So there's always going to be a little bit of both intrinsic and extrinsic motivation for everyone. The problem comes when one is more abused, and so I would say, we have what's called the overjustification effect, which is when you're given an external reward, and that reward overshadows your love for what you're doing. So then it becomes a chore or work, or you're trying to earn that reward, and then you say to yourself, well, I must not like it that much because I'm getting paid $50 million to do it. And so that's kind of the dichotomy that we have a little bit. We can also see extrinsic motivation be used for people that are trying a new task or new skill. They're trying to learn something new. They don't have that intrinsic drive just yet. And so we can use external motivators and external rewards to push someone in the right direction. But absolutely, for an athlete, we should be always striving for that internal motivation. It's much more rich. It's much more full, and it certainly drives us to higher levels and to higher performance.
For sure. Yeah, and that's a good point. Kind of everything we talk about, everyone has to remember it's kind of subjective in the way that you can use it. Nothing has a negative or positive connotation off the bat. So, too much intrinsic can just drive someone to burn out way too early,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And then, like you said, little extrinsic can get someone going. And if I have a little nephew and I want to get him to practice free throws, if I tell him you make 5 free throws in a row, I'll give you $5, I bet he'll start practicing,
Absolutely.
you know?
Yeah,
So,
and then we can also kind of see, the skillful leader will ingrain that intrinsic motivation very early. They'll plant that seed early, and so in that example that you're using of trying to, or teaching a young kid how to play golf or something like that,
mhm.
you can kind of phrase the way that you're teaching them in such a way that it really like lights their fire. And so I remember kind of our mentor Judy Van Ralt would talk about positive coaching and say, you tell a kid no one's ever been able to hit a golf ball over that hill over there, and then that kid is going to sit there for the next 2 hours and try and hit that golf ball over the hill. And that's that skillful leadership of ingraining intrinsic motivation in a young athlete. So absolutely, and like what you said about burnout, if an athlete is so intrinsically driven that fire can burn a little bit too hot and a little bit too fast, to the point where they're exhausted and they can no longer really maintain that motivation. So that's an excellent point.
Yeah, and that kind of is a good segue into Jordan.
Hmm.
You look at how exhausted he was after he won the championship the year his father died, and just all that effort put in, and just crying on the floor with the trophy. Like
Hmm.
all that motivational internal turmoil, Burns perfect, on top of not only himself but his teammates day in and day out.
Yeah,
That's burning every intrinsic motor you got right there,
yeah,
for sure.
absolutely. Yeah, and I like I like that idea of not being too driven in either category, and I think that's very important. Something that I've always kind of talked about, or at least tried to think about, is how one develops that intrinsic motivation on their own, or by
Mhm.
themselves. And I think the time that we're living in right now really lends itself to that. Uh, a lot of athletes are losing their seasons, losing their championship season, maybe not even practicing. And it's a great time to really take a step back and evaluate why it is that you are doing what you're doing. And you're going to find that you either love it, and you miss it and you want to get back to playing, or you're at that point where you're kind of taking a breath of fresh air of, oh, I get a break. And so it's really important to kind of reflect on which camp you're in there. And if you're in
Mhm.
that kind of almost burnt out phase of you're tired of your sport, you're um, you know, taking this opportunity to take a break and things like that, it can be a good opportunity to look back and say, maybe why did I start? What was, if I'm a football player taking a break from football this season, why did I play Pee Wee football? What was it that I loved? And that's a great way to kind of recognize and then, develop that intrinsic motivation.
For sure. And something really cool. I was talking to my buddy, and his younger brother is a senior in high school, and they were talking, and he was saying how he doesn't really want to play ball going forward, but if he can get a scholarship to a good school, Ivy League, like he would so do it. So again, thinking of your values and lining it up with, furthermore, his intrinsic value of actually playing baseball isn't that much, but
Mhm.
the extrinsic value of going to an Ivy League school for on a scholarship for sport, but getting the academic on top of it, it kind of molds the thought processes and the moves you go as you go further in life.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and the skillful coach, I think, recognizes that and then uses a lot of, positive coaching techniques to not only recognize when a player is very extrinsically motivated, but then also to take that step back and really kind of foster that intrinsic drive or that for that athlete. So that's a excellent point.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I agree with everything you just said.
Awesome.
Um,
Yeah. So for anyone watching, if you have any questions or want to get into contact with either Chris or myself, please reach out at info@thementalbarbell.com, and we are more than happy to answer any and all of your questions. Right now, we are offering 30-minute free, no commitment consultations to see if working together would help you advance towards your goals. So we hope to hear from you, and thank you very much, Chris.
Anytime, Ian.
All right.